Hey guys, Zack here, and this is my review of Trollhunters Tales of Arcadia. Okay, so this episode, Wingmen, is very much about Org and Toby's relationship. That is what the main purpose of the episode is. The main purpose is to explore their relationship and what they mean to each other, which is fitting considering what the episode is about. But also, this episode serves as the start of Strickler's character arc because up until now he's just been kind of a recurring villain. He's been kind of an ass. He's had his moments, but for the most part, he's just kind of been this evil character who we haven't really gotten to like all that much. Although he has his moments again, but for the most part, he hasn't really been a good person, and that's kind of where that starts to stop here. But in case this episode opens up with exactly where the last one left off, where Strickler walks out of the dentist's office, notices that the Inferno is missing, and then his car is attacked by Anger Rot. And we get to see the rest of that scene at the end, where after Anger Rot attacks the car, Strickler tries to drive off, and but Anger Rot proceeds to climb onto the car and proceeds to try and stab Strickler repeatedly through it. And of course, Strickler is trying his best to shake him off, while also trying to drive safely, which isn't going very well. But of course, Anger Rot is trying to attack him, and proceeds to, and of course, this is this point where Anger Rot proceeds to break in through the window of the car and tries to grab Strickler, and insists that nothing can stop him anymore, and that now that once he's done with Strickler, he'll kill the Trollhunter and everyone else. And of course, Strickler proceeds to insist that he must be mad, but of course Anger proceeds to tell him that he's not. He's finally free. At which point, Strickler realizes that hasn't been paying attention to the road, because in large part because Anger Rot's been trying to attack him this whole time while he's in the car, and he proceeds to drive his car off the cliff and just barely makes it out in time. And Strickler, having survived his car wreck and believing Anger Rot is probably fine, proceeds to get as far away from the car wreck as possible, while Anger Rot is just kind of chilling out on the bottom of a cliff, recovering. But in any case, is this point where Jim proceeds to explain what exactly it is, the rest of what happened after he got the kill stone away from Anger Rot. As he goes on to explain, Anger Rot's obviously the Inferno was destroyed, and Jim points out that he wasn't particularly happy about the fact that his soul was lost, and concludes that with the Inferno gone to no longer control him and also no longer has his soul in it, he'll probably be on the warpath, which of course Blinky reasons is all the more reason for them to find the third triumvirate stone and get ready to deal with Gunmar before something actually happens. And of course, they do wonder where the last of the triumvirate stones actually is. At which point, Claire proceeds to repeat the rhyme verbatim in the legend of the triumvirate stones, and everybody's surprised because she has it memorized. But she does point out that she just recently memorized 400 lines of Shakespeare for a play. So she points out that she can probably remember a little rhyme about a couple of triumvirate stones. And Toby, after hearing that, points out that they've already got the Mountains Peak magic swamps, but also wonders where caverns. That points out that the only thing left is Caverns Deep. But of course, Blinky points out that would be pretty much an impossible task, pointing out that even as a troll with his longevity. He points out that all trolls live in Caverns Deep, and that it would take pretty much all of their lifetimes just to find it. So he points out that it would be impossible to search all the caverns where all trolls live. But of course points out that they are going to need to figure it out, since they'll need to find a way to deal with Anger Rot. They need to figure out to deal with Anger Rot, but also Gunmar, because obviously Gunmar is the main threat that they're trying to deal with. But of course, it's at this point where they then proceed to wonder where Arg is, and with Blinky pointing out that if they're going to make a plan to attack Gunmar and get the last of the Triumvirate Stones, they're going to need all hands on deck. But they do point out that, but everybody else points out that they hadn't really seen him and don't really know where he is. And at which point we find out what happened and where he is. As it turns out, he is currently visiting with Vendel, who is doing another checkup on Arg to see how the Creeper Sun is progressing. And what we find out is that Arg unfortunately can no longer use his left hand for the most part. He can barely wiggle his fingers. And of course Vendel points out that that's a bad thing, obviously, and tells him that he is yet to tell his friends what's going on. But also points out that the obvious problem, and that eventually he will have to tell them, because eventually they are going to just find him turned to stone with no real explanation as to why, and that he's going to have to tell him. And as he does this, he wraps a bandage around Arg's arm. But at which point, Arg points out that he kind of silently agrees, but also tells him not today. And Vendel decides to honor that, telling him that they don't have to tell them today. But also points out that he's probably just going to tell everybody that he punched the wall, which it turns out was exactly what he does. We'll get to that. But of course he proceeds to. But of course, it's at this point where Jim is on his way to Vendel's workshop to cleave the second of the Triumvirate Stones and facet it so that it can be used to unlock new things in his armor. But as they're about to do that, and as Jim is talking shop and planning to get ready to do something, to get ready to go and ask Vendel for help, and use his workshop, it's suddenly all of the lights in Troll Market go dim, which of course causes everybody to wonder what exactly is going on. But Jim insists that he isn't sure, but that he's going to find out, and proceeds to summon his armor. But it's at this point where Black Dweller stops him, telling him that he needs to put the sword away because their visitors are sensitive to the light. At which point we then proceed to meet Queen Usurna of the Cabrera Trolls, and also the Cabrera Trolls themselves. And we find out, and of course she's there on a social visit, and of course Blinky points out that it's rare to see the Cabreras out of the caverns where they live, and he does proceed to point out that it's rare to see them this close to the surface. And of course, it's at this point where they proceed to both A, wonder why they look like Arg, and B, wonder if they had to in fact have the third Triumvirate Stone. And Blinky points out that in the latter case, it's probably a coincidence. It probably is a very convenient coincidence, since they obviously live in the very deepest caverns of the earth. But also points out that the reason they look like Arg is because well, he is one of them. He is a Cabrera Troll. He grew up in the Cabrera Caverns, but then taken away, but then was then forced to be raised as a Gum, which of course is unfortunate. But it's at this point where Vendel then proceeds to greet the Cabrera Trolls, and what we find out is that they're about as talkative as Arg. They speak in monosyllabic sentences. So, but they're not very well. They speak a little bit more elegantly than Arg, but Arg of course has difficulty speaking in general. So, yeah, we do find out why in a minute. But yeah, of course, Queen Usurna greets Vendel and is very happy to see him again. And Vendel points out that it's rare that they come this close to the surface. Points out that it's a very big honor to have the Cabrera that's there as a visiting tribe. At which point Jim and Toby decide, like, after that it's and of course she proceeds to meet Arg, and we find out that his full name is Argamont, which is interesting, but it makes sense. But she greets Arg, and Arg greets her, and they do point out that though they have been separated, she is very happy to see him again, pointing out that he'll always be one of the tribe, and does agree and does kind of greet him as family, which of course Arg returns the sentiment as well. But it's at this point where Jim and Toby then proceed to intervene, and of course Usurna is surprised, but not, well, she's confused and surprised but not confused to see a human troll hunter, and of course she proceeds to greet and of course Jim proceeds to greet her as royalty, but is also a little informal about it, but he then proceeds to ask them about to kind of take the opportunity to ask them about the third triumvic stone, and of course he tells them that he's heard legends of a stone that they have, and Toby adding that's of the triumvic variety, but of course Vendel interrupts them, pointing out that they're speaking way too informally toward a leader of a troll tribe, but Queen Usurna says it's all right, pointing out that their informality is amusing to her, at which point she tells them that she knows exactly what they're looking for, but does point out that they no longer have it, insisting that it was taken from them some time ago, which of course causes them to become a little confused as to how they're supposed to find it, but do thank her for her honesty, and of course, this is this point where Toby asks her if she doesn't have the stone, then why is she there? But of course, Vendel snaps at them a little bit for being rude, but then insists that they're there because it's for a pyroblix, which, as we find out, and of course, Jim is a little confused as to what a pyroblix is and asks Blinky about more information, and he says that it's of sorts a game, more or less, but, it's a time and honor tradition as much as dismemberment is, but, of course, he then proceeds to, but of course, at this point where the whole troll market proceeds to celebrate, and Queen Usurna points out that it's very lucky that she brought two of her hardiest trolls to come with her, and two large Krubera come up behind her. But meanwhile, Vendel offers both their human troll hunter as well as Arg to represent troll market, which of course is a big thing, and they do kind of celebrate Jim is just happy to represent troll market, well, and so as is Arg, but once all of that is gone, Jim goes back to his business where he goes to get ready to go and cleave the stone, while Vendel and Queen Usurna sit down in the bar in troll market and proceed to discuss Arg, and Arg overhears all of this conversation, but then proceed to go on, and she discusses that it's not that obviously the pyroblix isn't the only reason she's there, and points out that that Krubera have the ability to sense when one of their own is sick or dying, and then proceeds to point out that she feels like that she can sense that Arg isn't well and that he needs to come home, and of course Vendel is he's very adamant on the fact that Arg stay in troll market, even though she points out that he'll die there if he does. And insists that he come back to the Krubera caverns because their salt mines can keep him alive and enable him to live out his centuries. With only in that they won't have to worry about him being sick anymore. But of course, Vendel points out that he's not going to let her just forcibly take him. So she decides that he'll offer up a bit of a wager, which is that, and of course. He wagers it on the pyroblix claim, which of course Usurna mentions. The troll market has never won once in the many centuries that they've known each other. But he also points out that this is the first time that they've had a human troll hunter as well, and points out that he's grown to expect a lot from Jim. And this, of course, causes Queen Usurna to become intrigued, and insists that if she wins, that she gets Arg. But also asks him what would happen if Troll Market were somehow to win. And of course, Vendel proceeds to point out that if they win, Arg gets to choose for himself whether he stays or goes. And of course, they point out that that's a fine wager, and they both shake on it. And as of course Arg proceeds to hear all of this and proceeds to run away. He leaves Troll Market. We'll get to that. But of course at this point where they then proceed to get ready to go into the pyroblix. But before that, Jim is currently carving up the kill stone to fasten it and put it in his amulet, and while they're all just talking in Vendel's workshop, and of course everybody proceeds to wonder why Arg would no longer be a member of the Krubera troll tribe. At which point Blinky explains that in order to bolster their numbers, we find out that Gunmar kidnapped a lot of baby trolls from a lot of different tribes to make up his army. Back in the day, and he points out that Arg was unfortunately one of them, and of course, is at this point where, and of course, Claire points out that must be why he doesn't speak as elegantly as why Arg doesn't speak as elegantly as the other Krubera, and of course, Blinky does add to that, pointing out that being separated from your family and tribe can do wonders to stunt somebody's development and potential. But of course, Jim points out that they just need to win. That they just need to win the game, and also points out that if they're going to win, he's going to add. In order to win, he's going to add the new ability to his armor, and of course, Toby is admittedly salivating over the idea of adding a new stone to the amulet, But Jim then proceeds to tell Toby to stand back, pointing out that it's a very delicate ritualistic procedure, and that he shouldn't be standing so close to it. At which point he places the stone in his amulet and points out that once they have all three, they'll be able to go after Gunmar. But for now, he's going to see what the new ability does, and to kind of just feel out what the new stone does. That's essentially what he's planning to do, and he figures that the Pyroblex game is probably the best way to do that. But in any case. We then proceed to, in any case, but as they get ready to go prepare for the Pyroblex game, we see a scene of Strickler in the road, and he sees Otto in his car and flags him down, but Otto and Fragua refuse to let him in. And even though Strickler is very insistent, pointing out that it's only a matter of time before Angarat catches up to them. But of course, Otto refuses, pointing out that it's only a matter of time before he catches up to Strickler. And of course, Strickler continues to be insistent that he'll open the door, but Otto reveals that he's not going to, and then proceeds to tell him that he's discussed matters with the Janus Order, and concludes that Strickler is no longer worthy to lead them. Coldly telling him that he's only seeks his own glory, while the rest of the group is seeking Gunmar's revival and release, and tells him that obviously they can't be associated with somebody who would prioritize himself over the mission. But Strickler insists that he seeks the glory of all his fellow changelings, but and also tells Otto that if he doesn't let him in, that Angarad will kill him. And Otto just says he'll send flowers and coldly drives away. So yeah, this is what I was talking about. This is the part where Strickler winds up becoming, well, he starts developing into a good guy. He's not there yet, but this is where he starts. This is where his character arc officially starts. But because of this one moment where the Janus Order effectively just ices him out and won't let him be the leader anymore. That's kind of the big turning point for his character. But in any case, is this point where they get ready to go into Pyroblex, and what we find out is that Pyroblex is kind of like a game. It's where they have to take a ball and take a special ball and put it in the Suitscryer, and the Suitscryer is just serving as a goal for this. And of course, they then proceed to, and of course, Jim proceeds to wonder how they're actually supposed to win, pointing out that obviously the Kruberas are a lot bigger and hardier than they are. And of course they point out that they're going to need to just do their best and hopefully win the game. But it's this point where Vendel proceeds to walk up, and of course they note that Arg isn't, and of course Blinky notes that Arg is among them, which is odd to them because they point out that he needs to be there and needs to play. So they find it odd that he's not here, like at all. But and of course this is this point where Vendel walks up and also notes that Arg isn't there. And of course Blinky just plays it off as the fact that he didn't really notice Arg hadn't shown up yet. But Vendel is very insistent that Arg play, pointing out that they need him to win. But of course points out that they need to win the game, because he doesn't explain yet, but he does insist that they need to win, and that it's not just merely a matter of whether or not they win or whether or not they have fun. They need to win. But of course he then proceeds to tell Toby to go and find Arg, pointing out that Arg has always liked him best. And Toby, of course, makes himself scarce and goes to find him. And meanwhile, he tells Drawl that he's going to be Arg's substitution until he shows up. So, and of course, Droll is very happy to be able to compete in the Forge for Glory, but they're not competing for glory, they're competing to win. He reiterates that. And, but of course with that, he then tells them that, Jim then proceeds to ask when he can have his amulet back. But of course, which causes Vendel to become confused and then turns to Droll, pointing out that he should have told, that he hasn't, if asking him why he hasn't told Jim yet what's going on. And of course, Jim is confused too, wondering what exactly it is he's talking about. At which point, Droll proceeds to tell Jim that in Pyroblixed, all weapons are earned, including Jim's amulet, which, as we find out, is just strung up by some string in a little circle thing. But of course, this causes Jim to realize that they're going to need to earn, that he's going to need to earn his amulet, but also wonders how exactly that's going to work. But in any case, Vendel proceeds to walk off, and eventually the game does start, and of course, Droll and Jim do proceed to walk out of the arena with the two large Kubera trolls, and Droll tells Jim to go after the little one while he'll go after the big one. At which point, Jim asks which one's the little one. And of course, Droll does point out that that's a fair point, pointing out that Kubera are built for combat and trained to kill. So obviously, it's not going to be easy to tell which is which. But and of course, Jim points out that that's not great. But of course, with that, the match officially starts, and what we quickly find out is that in Pyroblix, it is legal to kill, and that becomes a problem because Jim finds that out very, very quickly as he tries to get the ball away from one of the Kubera, and they proceed to grab him and throw him against the floor, which of course Claire objects to that, but Blinky points out that it's all fair game, which of course is a problem. But of course Jim quickly realizes that he needs to get his amulet back if he stands any sort of chance against these guys, while Droll holds his own against the Kubera, but it's not enough because obviously one of their own is very much fighting down to at a disadvantage. But of course, the Kubera proceeds to score a point, while Kalina Serna gloats, pointing out that this human troll hunter seems to be having a bit of trouble, while Vendel just kind of shoots her a death glare. Meanwhile, as they're kind of dealing with that, Jim eventually as they're kind of dealing with that, Toby eventually does find Arg in their house. He's just sitting under a blanket playing Go-Go Sushi and refusing to leave Toby's room. And Toby goes upstairs and does wonder what he's doing and why he's hiding out in the house. And does proceed to pull the blanket off of him, but also discovers that Arg's hand is visibly injured. And Arg, again, as you mentioned earlier, he plays it off as punching a wall, but obviously he did not punch a wall. We know he didn't. But of course, Toby wonders why Arg just sequesters himself away in his room, pointing out that obviously that Jim needs him for their big Pyroblix game, and does point out that they definitely need him to come play. But Arg points out that he doesn't really want to, but Toby is insistent. It points out that that's not like that. Obviously, it's not really a big. But that obviously it's a big deal, but pointing out that even if he doesn't have to play, his family did come all the way to see him, and understands that, and points out that he should at the very least spend time with his family. But it's at this point where Nancy then proceeds to come home, and it's revealed that she was just sleeping on the couch, and when Toby assumed she was at bingo. But she then proceeds to force her way into the room, even though Toby is very much insisting that she not come in, and eventually is forced to cover up Arg with his with a blanket, which falls off, of course. But obviously, because Toby's Nana is legally blind, she doesn't fully understand that she's looking at a troll. So, but she does greet him. And does wonder why they have company, and Toby didn't tell her. And Toby quickly spins up a lie on the spot about how Arg's real name is quote unquote Arthur. He's from Japan and is an amateur sumo wrestler. And of course she proceeds to greet him in Japanese, which of course Arg returns sentiment and asks him if he can come downstairs to greet them. To come eat, and pointing out that she made pie. And of course, Arg comes downstairs, pointing out that he's not really all that hungry. But of course he proceeds to, push the pie away because, you know, trolls don't eat pie. That becomes apparent. But of course Toby points out that proceeds to continue with what he was saying earlier to Arg about how he did, and also proceeds to help himself to Arg's piece of pie. But he then proceeds to tell Toby that Arg that obviously he knows that it's stressful to deal with family sometimes, and he gets that. But also proceeds to point out what happened with his family, about how he knows that he sometimes get frustrated with his Nana because of things that happen, but that are a bit out of her control. But of course, I should mention. But he does point out that even though she's legally blind, smells like mothballs, and he does point out that she's the only family he really has, and took him in after what happened with his parents. And does point out that because of that, even though he does get frustrated with her sometimes, he decides that it's not worth it, because he realizes that it's just worth it to have family, and that you don't get mad at family. And sure enough, case in point, Nancy proceeds to bring Toby one of his little magic trick hats, telling him that her cat went to the bathroom in it. And of course Toby is upset at first, but then points out that after seeing his Nana's face, and the look of sadness on her face, he does point out that it's not a big deal. He'll buy another one. And she's very happy that it's fine, and proceeds to go back to her business. And of course, Arg decides to take all of that to take all of what Toby said to heart, and does point out that and does realize that what Toby says is true. And at which point, Toby proceeds to offer him the messed up hat, and Arg does eat it, and that's just it. He just eats it. But in any case, we kind of going back to the Pirate Books game. Toby is. We find out that the game is 4-0 in favor of the Carreras, and of course they quickly find out that and then of course Jim is upset because they have never once gotten the ball, but then and wonders why they aren't allowed to get it, but then realizes that they need to earn it, and of course Joel proceeds to pat him on the shoulder, telling him that he's learned the idea of Pyroblicks, but. It's at this point where the game goes into its halftime of sorts, and they proceed to enter what Joel refers to as the scalding hour, where they repair their wounds with hot metal in preparation for the next half of the game. And of course they proceed to pull him to the side, and of course Jim they all proceed to get ready to rest up for the next part of the game. But of course it's at this point where Vendel comes back and is visibly upset that Arg is still not at the game. But of course Jim points out that he'll show up, but Vendel is insistent that they need him to win. And of course Blinky points out that it's obviously for the glory of Troll Market, but of course Vendel points out that no, it's not a matter of that. If they're playing for Arg, and that they're playing for they're not playing for glory. They're playing for Arg specifically. And of course, when they wonder what's going when everybody else wonders what's going on, Vendel explains that he made a wager with Usurna about how they'll take Droll away, about how they'll take Arg away if they win the game. And of course they realize that's a problem, and Jim wonders if they can actually do that, but and wonders how they plan to do that. But of course Vendel points out that how, who, why, and when don't really matter. That all that matters is that they win for Arg, and proceeds to go back to his spot next to Queen Usurna. And of course, after realizing what the stakes actually are, they proceed to point out that they do in fact need to play for Arg to keep himself, pointing out that Arg is their friend and they're not going to give up on them. So and of course with that, the game resumes again, and they just with a newfound determination, Jim and Droll proceed to insist that they do in fact get ready to play the game for real this time, and actually get Arg safe and sound at Troll Market. At which point, And they quickly, Joel makes a plan to help Jim get his amulet back so that they can actually win the game. And of course, Jim is successful at evading the Krubera trolls and getting his amulet back. And with that, he now has a bit of a more of a fighting chance against the Kruberas. At which point the arena changes to, you know, its usual training arena type situation where they have to climb the arena to get to the Suit Square. And of course they proceed to continue to play the game. And with their newfound determination, Joel and Jim are able to play. But of course the Kruberas do give it their all. And at one point they try to ram at Jim and trying to continue to win the game and get their last point that they need. But Jim, in the process of trying to push them away, proceeds to summon a warrior shield, which is revealed to be the power from the Killstone, which, of course, he proceeds to knock one of the Krubera away and is able to get the ball away from them. And after everybody sees that and also wonders where Jim got a warrior shield, Blinky points out that it most likely is from the Killstone that he just freshly cleaved. And of course, when Droll sees the warrior shield on Jim's arm, he points out that he's earned it, and then tells him that it's time to use it. And with that, Jim starts using his shield to defend himself, to kind of push the Krubera away, and also uses his sword throwing technique that he learned many episodes ago to knock the ball out of the Krubera's hands so that he can get it to Droll, and they can continue to score points. And eventually, they are able to successfully score 4 points against the Krubera, and tying it up, and realizing that they now only need 1 point either way to win. Which, and of course, Droll proceeds to get ready to go in and get ready to face off against the Krubera so they can get their last point. But in the process, he winds up getting rammed hard by one of the Krubera and falls off the Hero's Forge. And of course, a timeout is officially declared, where they get ready to. Where they stop and tell him that the game that they need to stop. But of course they proceed to Blinky proceeds to assess the damages and wonder if Droll is fit enough to play. But what we find out is that Droll had gotten hit so hard that he saw his dad. So and Blinky points out that that's gonna be a hit that's gonna take a while to wear off. Of course, they proceed to scoop him up and insist that Jim is probably going to need to play the game by himself and fend off both of the Kruberas until somebody else arrives to help him. But pointing out that AAARRRG's alternate isn't really fit to play right now. And of course, Jim points out he's reluctant to face off against both of the Trollhunter, both of them by himself, but he'll do it for AAARRRG. At which point the game resumes again, and sure enough, Jim uses his nimble footwork to kind of keep away from both of the Kruberas at the same time, and of course, Vendel at this point takes an opportunity to snark back to concern about the human body makes their Trollhunter very nimble, as opposed to a troll body, which isn't very nimble. But of course, Jim is very nimble and tries to get the point away, the last point by himself. He can't. We find out that the Kruberas are just too much for him to handle, and of course, as they're about to both ram him, it's at this point where AARRRG suddenly shows up out of the blue and stops both of them in their tracks. And of course, Jim is happy that he's no longer in danger of being badly injured. Then realizes AARRRG is there to help him, and realizing that they can now have a chance to actually win the game, they proceed to get ready to go and throw the last shot. And AARRRG winds up getting, and of course Jim winds up getting knocked out of his armor and is unfortunately too injured to continue. But he manages to pass the ball to AARRRG, who is about ready to score the goal. But the two Kruberas proceed to gang up on him and try to keep him away from the goal. And in the process, AARRG's bandage comes off of his arm. But AARRRG is eventually able to land the last remaining point that they need and win the game for them. And this, of course, winds up being a big celebration as Troll Market proceeds to celebrate their victory, while everybody else celebrates the fact that AARRRG won. But also know that and Jim tells AARRRG into a fierce hug point, being very happy that he won the game for them. But then sees AARRRG's arm and realizes that his arm is all sorts of messed up. And of course, and of course, Arg points out that that tells him not to worry about it right now. But it's at this point where both Vendel and Usurna come out of their booth, telling them that they've officially won Pyroblix and are very happy, and with Vendel pointing out that was a Pyroblix for the ages. And of course, because of that, Vendel obviously won his little wager. So Usurna proceeds to ask Arg what his choice is, and proceeds to tell him the obvious thing about. He proceeds to reveal that Arg can either leave his home in Troll Market and come back with them, or live out the rest of his days at Troll Market. And it's at this point where everybody wonders what exactly is to happen. But but then Blinky gets a good look at Arg. Finally, gets a good look at what happened to Arg, because obviously Arg has been kind of hiding what's been going on with him the past many episodes now. But when he finally gets a good look, he realizes that Arg had been poisoned with Puper Sun, is slowly dying and turning to stone. And of course, Claire realizes this is why things have been weird since the Quagwump caves. But of course, they point out that they quickly realize that Angaron must have cut him. And Jim expresses the problem, points out that it should have been him, and is angry that he didn't notice sooner. But Arg tells him that he specifically didn't tell them because he didn't want them to worry. And tells Jim that it's not really his fault. And Toby, of course, isn't taking it well. He just kind of stands off on his own for a little bit, trying to gather his thoughts. But of course, they then proceed to ask. But of course, they then proceed to ask Arg what he wants to do. But Arg eventually reluctantly says that he'll leave to go with his fellow Gruberas to kind of get the treatment that he needs. And of course, everybody is shocked but not surprised by this decision. And of course, Blinky points out that Blinky is very, very visibly speechless, because he can't really muster up the words he needs to actually tell Arg how he truly feels. But while Claire pulls him into a hug, admitting that she wishes that he had gotten to know Arg a little better. But everyone else just kind of says a sorrowful goodbye, pointing out that obviously they're going to miss him. And of course, after everybody says their tearful goodbye, he then proceeds to try and give one last fist bump to Toby, but Toby is too visibly broken up to commit to it and leaves. And Arg understands why, but of course Jim points out that maybe they could always visit, but Blinky points out that that's only the Gruberas can survive in the deep caverns, and points out that Arg is probably on his own. So of course for that reason they can't really go and visit Arg, but Arg points out that it'll be fine, but also tells them to get Gunmar for him, at which point he proceeds to get ready to leave with his fellow Gruberas. But before they leave, he then turns to the rest of them and tells them to tell Toby that they're family, and with that he proceeds to sadly walk off. And everybody's visibly upset over the fact that obviously Arg had to leave them, but they do point out that they're going to need to have to get Gunmar for him, at which point they proceed to get ready to go about their business, although they are mourning the fact that their friend had to leave them, so they're taking a bit longer to recover than they would hope. But meanwhile, Toby is obviously the one who's taking it the hardest, being now holed up in his room, playing Go-Go Shushi alone, and at one point he looks over at the spare controller and visibly starts tearing up. But it's at this point where he hears his Nana call to him, telling him that it's time that he needs to come down and eat. But Toby insists that he's never eating again. But of course, at which point Nana points out that that'd be rude to their new exchange student. Which of course, since that was the lie Toby made up, realizes that it must be Arg. And sure enough, he hears Arg giggling downstairs, and of course proceeds to run out of his bedroom, and of course proceeds to pull Arg into a fierce hug once he sees him in their house, and wonders what exactly it is that wonders why Arg is back, and how he actually wound up there. But of course Arg tells him that while he knows he'll die if he stays, he points out that he's not ready to leave just yet. He's going to help he's not going to let himself die on Toby's watch, and that he'll absolutely help him fight Domar. And of course, Toby is happy to hear that, pulling him into a hug, and with Arg adding that the Kubera aren't his family, that Toby's his family. And Toby's happy to hear that, but also points out that once all is said and done, he is going to take Arg back to the Kubera caves too, personally. So, and with that, the two then proceed to pull each other in a hug, and they sit down to have a nice dinner. And with that, they also proceed to go back up into Toby's room. And Jim is currently taking out the trash, so he sees Toby's room from where he is. And he does chuckle because he realizes now that Arg is probably going to he's probably going to die, being perfectly honest. But Arg is obviously happy. He doesn't want to just go down into the Kubera caves, and he'd rather die amongst loved ones than spend the rest of his natural life with people he doesn't really know all that well, I should mention. But which is a very solemn and happy moment. But of course at this point where as Jim is just kind of being happy that Arg is going to continue to stay with them, then he hears a rustling coming from the bushes nearby, and Jim proceeds to pull out of his amulet and is about to summon his armor when suddenly Strickler pops out, and Strickler then proceeds to plead with Jim that he needs to hear him out, and points out that that if Jim wants to protect his mother, that he has to help him, and grabs Jim's arm in a bit of a heartfelt plea, not in a menacing way, just in a way that seems like he's obviously very visibly scared. And of course, Jim is then wondering what to do with Strickler and this newfound revelation. So, yeah, first and foremost, Queen Lacerda is gonna be an interesting character going forward. I'll admit that. They introduce her late into part 1, but she has an interesting, story to her. We'll get to that. But of course, this episode also kind of hints to where that story's going to go. I will admit that. If you guys know what this story is with this series, you'll know why her suggestion of Arg going back down to the salt mines in the Kubera caves to live out the rest of his natural life may, in fact, be a bit of a hint as to what's going on with her. But of course, obviously, this episode is very much about Toby and Arg's relationship, and does confirm that Arg sees Toby as family. They are brothers, so to speak. So, yeah, of course, they have a very close relationship. So, that of course is what the episode's name is referring to. But also, again, this episode continues the character arc with Strickler, and where it officially starts, because obviously we've gotten hips into his deeper character with his relationship with Barbara, but this episode is where he officially starts having his character arc and starts working his way toward becoming a better person. Because obviously now that he's been iced out of the Janus Order and now has to deal with Angor Rot, that is where his story starts. That is where he officially starts becoming a better person. So, yeah, that's gonna be interesting. That's gonna be interesting to see going into the next couple of seasons. We're gonna be dissecting that a little bit more. Going into the rest of the series, and then also we're going to see more of that in 3 Below, albeit they're not as important in 3 Below. And then also the movie kind of explores that a little bit more as well. So we're going to be seeing a little bit more of his character arc going forward for the foreseeable future. So that's going to be important. That's going to be an important thing going forward. But in case, that's going to do it for my review of Trollhunters. What did you guys think? Let's get a discussion going in the comment section down below, or over on my Discord server, link in the description. Anyway, thank you guys so much for watching. If you enjoyed, be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. Also, be sure to follow me on Twitter in the description below. I mean, my Twitter's still a little bit broken, but it's better now-ish. So go follow me over there. Go and check out my Twitch also, because I stream Sergeants and please go check that out. Go and check out my Discord. That's where I'm trying to be more active, so please go do that. And also be sure and go and check out my videos linked in my Patreon. It helps support me, helps fund future projects. I would appreciate that. And also, finally, if you want to see more content from me, then be sure to check out the videos linked in the end screen. The top video is the most recent video. It may or may not be this video. Whereas the bottom video is a video recommended to you based on what you've already seen from me. So if you want to try something new, or see more of what you like, then be sure to check both of those videos out. But in any case, thank you guys so much for watching. And until next time, we'll see you guys in the next video. Peace!